Thank you all for being here on a very rainy Sunday morning. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mo, Nilankur. It's really nice that you all are hosting this for us. It's a Sunday, and we're talking about absence. It's not really brunch conversation, but stay with me. I think it'll be quite interesting. As she said, this is the first iteration of Absent Archives. We want to create a platform where people like us working with memory and really facing everyday challenges, like how do we take it on and how do we work with it and how do we create something tangible. Um, just a minute. And today's talk, we're calling it Spirit, Song. Just a second. This is the problem. Spirit, Song and Story, Archiving the Intangible in Goa. Oh, I don't know what is going on. But first, I want to begin with a city, which is Calcutta, the city where I was born, the city where I grew up. And I left Calcutta when I was 18, but I keep going back to it, even though maybe not physically, but in the realms of the mind. And Calcutta is such an archive in itself, no? Decrepit city. It's so beautifully decrepit, though. I don't know if I can say that, but it truly is. And I remember this one line written by a New York Times journalist many years ago, like Calcutta is like tattoos on an aging diva. And I really love that. Actually, I remember it. So it's so like, I think it just typifies the city. It's also the city where I fell in love with the archive, not the documented, temperature control kind, but the hot mess kind. We all know that. So when I started working on my book, The Armenians of Calcutta, I was trying to document a community which sort of predates the British in Calcutta. And I wanted to talk about them, understand them, really approaching from a point of curiosity. And I really found nothing. And it was a real challenge. And I thought I was going to the British Library. I thought I'd go to some of the libraries in the US. And I was actually preparing to do that. But something stopped me. And I said, hang on, this is, let's look at migration from this lens, from the lens of departure, not of arrivals, actually. And so let's look at what is left behind, who is left behind, and the whys of that. While at that time it sounded very romantic and all of that, but I regretted that decision many times over because I didn't find anything. And so what would I do? I waited. I waited and I waited and I waited. But let me tell you, what emerged just from that waiting, and the book overall took about 10 years end to end to completion. These gems that I think you will all really resonate with, that are nowhere else, and except in that book. And so the book itself becomes a really important archive of the community and the city. And then I'll quickly tell you about this other one. I did another project when I used to work as a photographer artist called May 3rd, 1945. It was a Fulbright funded project. And these American curators had found a shoebox of negatives that of some American GI. We knew nothing about them. They knew nothing about them, but we knew it was by an American GI who took these pictures probably in 1945 in and around Calcutta during World War II. And they asked a few of us to respond to those. And I decided that, okay, I'm going to work with the date. And I thought, okay, this is a great idea because I'm going to go into the municipal office. I'm going to type in this date in some fancy machine I imagined. I don't know why. And I'll get a whole host of names. And then I'll go and find somebody and I'll work on his or her life. But of course, spoiler alert, there was nothing like that. And I only found, again, just void. And now I panicked because I had already given my proposal. I didn't know how the hell to do this. So I went rogue. I went completely desperate. I would stop people on the street who kind of looked the part of maybe he or she is 70 years old, and I'd ask them, and I'd knock on doors, and I'd do all kinds of extremely awkward things. And then finally, before giving up, I decided that I was going to put an ad in a Bengali daily in the classified section. And one person reached out, okay, like literally in that massive metropolis, one person reached out. And anyway, then the project happened in whichever way. But the thing is that it kind of made me realize that absence is not abstract. It's so real. It's clumsy. It's messy, and it often makes you bang on people's doors at 8 a.m. So it's really the way we work. Um, so that kind of led to the foundation of the idea of starting this organization, Archival Matter, where we work with forgotten histories in the region. And every project since then has asked us, what does it mean to document what was never meant to be written down? And somewhere along the way, I realized that it's not just me. There are others doing this work all over South Asia. We have some of them here with us today, fighting for what is intangible, preserving the overlooked. And this repeated nature of the absence visiting us every step gave birth to this platform, which is Absent Archives. And I'm really thankful that all of you are here, and I hope that we can have many more of these. It's a space to think about what happens when the record fails. When we turn to taste, to song, to folklore, to gesture as the archive. Which brings me to today's wonderful panel. I'm so happy to have them here. Sonia, Shisat, I think you said everything, but I just want to add that she's, of course, the undisputed Fado Queen of Goa and India. And she carries centuries of longing in her voice, and she keeps training student after student. And we have to ask you how you actually do that. How do you pass on the Saudaj, actually? That's a really important question. Then there's Leena, whose work, actually, I'm very fascinated by your work because you actually work with institutional archives and you work with all that which is outside the archive, which makes it, I really want to understand that tension. And Hansel, who has turned the once dismissed rustic hooch into this heritage spirit that we all have come to love and negotiating its place in the cultural landscape. And if any has a voice today, it's because of Hansel. And all of you are probably craving a drink also because of him. So they are not just archivists in the traditional sense, they are the keepers of unwritten memory. They are witnesses to what the record excludes, and they are makers of archives where none existed before. So let's ask ourselves, what is the archive of our time? What are we leaving behind? And what might we still be able to save if we begin now? With that, welcome to Absent Archives. So I actually, so we dive straight into conversation. I think we're all dying to know how they work. I actually wanted to start with you, Sonia and Hansel, and since Hansel is busy, maybe you can start. He's turning what you think. So I was actually quite interested to know that you were in law, right? And you were a geologist. And you all were kind of going about your days in your newfound careers. And I want to know, what was that moment when you all realized that there is a lot, that this is like really important to work, and that there is a lot that sort of needs to be preserved? When was that moment when you kind of realized? Because otherwise you could just be a singer like anybody else, but you did so much more.
So I started singing Fado in 2003. By 2008, that was the beginning. I guess to sing three Fados at that time. But then by 2008, I had already had my solo concert in Portugal, and then in Bangalore, then in Delhi. So like it's an hour of Fado, from three Fados to an hour and a half of Fado. And then I came back to Goa, and there were events happening, and every time there was a Fado performance, there would be this particular audience, and there would be these known faces who loved Fado and would come to listen to it. Years passed, and around 2015 or 16, I realized that a lot of those faces had already passed on. There was no Mario Miranda, there was no Lucio Miranda. There were a lot of these people who used to regularly come for anything to do with Fado, they would be there. And then we were losing them. So I realized that the audience for Fado was dwindling in India. And therefore that would mean no future. So Fado in the City was a project in 2016 where we took Fado to places where people normally didn't come for Fado, or Fado never went there. So we did Fado in 10 different places in Goa, free concerts. Each concert had a different theme. So we're basically trying to popularize it. People came. Every concert, I would ask a show of hands. How many of you don't speak Portuguese? How many of you are listening to Fado for the first time? And a lot of hands would go up, and that was our success. Um, but they still felt that something more needed to be done. And then in 2000, to the end of 2016, we started Fado the Goa project, through which we started teaching Fado. Now, the challenge here is Fado is an art form which is not taught. Traditionally, in Portugal, from where it comes, it's not taught. There's no teacher student system, there is no grade examination system. So, first and foremost, we were teaching an art form in a foreign language to an audience that was not born listening to it, and a different genre, different language, different expression, and with no existent syllabus or module that we could follow.
I just want to ask you, is it not taught because it's a folk form, therefore it's not taught?
Yeah, so there's a statement in the world of Fado. You cannot be made a Fadista, Fado singer. You have to be born one. That's how they say. You cannot make a poet, you'll be born one, right? So, however, today there are some training sessions they have in Portugal, but again, it is for a Portuguese speaking audience, an audience that is born in the land where they have heard Fado from their childhood. So it's like having classes here of Indian classical music or Goan folk music, because we've heard it, we know the language, and we can learn it. Now, teaching something which is from some other place here existed here for some time, for a long time, but in small pockets. So, how do we teach? So, it was basically, the syllabus that I formulated was overcoming all the obstacles that I had faced. First and foremost, I didn't speak the language when I started singing Fado. I didn't have places from where I could get the Fado in 2003. Later on, of course, life became easy. Pronunciation and the way my mother would grill me, I do the same with the students. And so all these obstacles that came my way were basically the steps in the syllabus. The idea is this art form has lived here for over 100 years. So why should it die off? Let it live longer. And that's how we had over 300 students that took interest, and some of them are sitting here.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so
nice.
yeah, so it's really nice.
That's lovely. And you, Hansel, like when you came back to your family business, when did you realize that this needs more than just distilling the liquor?
So my family gave me deep roots, but also rich supply. So I was based in a few countries where it was in Papua New Guinea, I was in the middle of the jungle, and everything works very slow in Papua New Guinea. I had time on the internet, and I chanced upon a document written by the University of Warwick, and it was the definitive document on fame. And I was very interested. Richard Rangnicker sadly passed away off the list. He sent three researchers down to Goa, and they interviewed. I think it was the most comprehensive study. They interviewed commentators, they interviewed distillers, bottlers, as well as producers. That is one thing I did. Now the other part is I also grew up in two parts of Goa. Grew up in Moira and grew up in South Goa as well, Kumbuli. And so I saw, as a kid, my grandfather would take me in Moira to see Feni distilleries. In South Goa, my dad would take me to see Feni distilleries. And so it was something that you don't learn, but as she said, you just see and you imbibe. When I read this document in Papua New Guinea, I was quite shocked. First of all, it was the only document available, a study on Feni available on the internet. But this was about 15 years ago. Maybe not much was uploaded then. But the second thing was there were glaring statements in, which for me did not seem comfortable. As this is completely contrary to what I know. And I'm a geologist, and so I was, the reason was very important, and there had to be science to it. And also, you have to be able to read through fluff. If you're trying to study geology, you can't assume. You have to know, but you also have to deduce. And I'll give you one simple. I'll just raise one statement, which was the statement that made me look at this industry differently. Very eminent commentator on agriculture, botany, all these things, always on the news. I call him a serial offender because he was the first person to mention that the cashew. Simple question: why was the cashew brought to Goa? Why did the cashew even be used? And he made a very sweeping, profound statement saying that the cashew was brought to Goa to prevent soil erosion. And it's a story that it's a line that is used very commonly, and it's repeated so much that people believe it. Why did we make Feni? That's another question. The same person has commented later. I mean, this last 2 years ago. That's interesting. The first statement, cashew came around 1555, the way I looked at it. And I found it very blanket that the Portuguese brought cashew into Goa because anybody could have brought it. It happened during the Portuguese Empire. Could be a Dutch, could be an Italian, could be anybody. A lot of people traveling. So when you say Portuguese brought cashew, but why did they bring it? To prevent soil erosion. But when you analyze that statement, which is now repeated so many times, you realize how stupid it is. In the 1500s, the Europeans were thinking of conquest, gold, loot, maybe trade, so many other things, maybe religion. Nobody thought about planting trees and preventing soil erosion. They were after timber. We live in a tropical part of the world, there are so many different trees. Why would someone think in Goa would bring a tree from the Amazon to prevent soil erosion in Goa? And incredibly, people believe that statement till, and they keep on repeating it. It's quoted in the Feni policy, it's quoted in the excise documents, it's quoted by everyone. That's the first thing. Why was Feni made? The same person said that someone was sitting on a hill and he saw pigs eating cashews, walking in the heat of the afternoon, and fell down flat. And that's how he decided to make everything. This is published 2 years ago in the Goa magazine of International Film Festival. Incredible. Everyone who you're getting a whole generation reading nonsense. And believing it is because you come from someone of authority who's writing about it. So that was the beginning. And for me, I realized there are two perspectives. One is upper class talking about it, and there's another real story of the lower class looking upon it. And that is where things get lost in translation. And one again coming to the same document, from the lower caste perspective, they asked a distiller, and he said Feni is distilled 3 times. And someone who knows the industry and said, oh, Feni is never distilled 3 times. Nobody wastes time to distill it 3rd time. So I tracked that person down. Took me a few years, track that person down. I want to find out what did that person talk to Mr. Mukhopadhyay about and say that it distilled 3 times. And you know what he said? He said it sounded important. I want it to sound important. 2 times everyone does. I want to sound important.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's important. So it's important for him because he wanted to certainly he's been reviewed by an academy. He wanted to sound more important than just being called a distiller. So again, two perspectives, and that is where I started. That's when I started looking. So one is if you're trying to create a brand and talk about Feni, you also get people to understand what it is, because when they understand what it is, they begin to love it. And that's where I come from.
I think you have been very successful and you're obviously continuing this. And I think that's why the work that all of you are doing is so important. I want to come to you actually because you, as an art historian and a curator, you kind of negotiate both, right? You are very much, I think is it not on? Or you can take handstands. You work in the traditional sense of archive making, etc. And then with Goa Familia and the Sanduk archives, etc. All of that, you're doing work which is kind of both. How do you deal with the tension and how do you decide what makes the archive?
That's a very large question, but yes, continuing with the anecdotes that they've shared. My transition into this space of looking at oral histories outside of the formal archives, let's say in museums, etc., came about through different projects, including a fellowship that I did with Goa Chitra Museum here, the Sanduka project, which I did again with IFA, and Goa Familia, of course, that started in 2019. I have to mention here Akshay Mahajan, with whom I run this project, And it was a very random discussion by Rahab Alana, in fact, of Al-Qazi, to begin a kind of documentation of so much that is existing in family albums. And a small discussion turned into this, plan to actually go out there and start interviewing people, talking to people, opening their cupboards, looking at what they have, albums, photographs, stories, because people were crucially the ones who were remembering. And so this, whole discussion of absence is something that is so that we encountered in so many layers right from the start. Here I do want to bring in that both Akshay and I probably have been here for around 11 years. Akshay is a photographer and curator. I'm an art historian and curator. And in the beginning, obviously, because of the lack of language, the whole insider outsider consideration is very, very clear. Nobody will allow you to come and open their cupboards and tell you all their stories unless they're very sure of what you were doing. So it took some time, but I think that the whole area of people telling stories and the stories not matching with each other and the stories not matching with documented history, all that became part of this entire, what we were doing. And one of the things we decided right from the start was not to judge, not to be judgmental in that sense. We were not looking at it from the academic sense. We were looking at it as people's stories, which is why our open calls over the years have been also so successful because, people send us so much material. Everyone is excited about what they have.
Can I just because somebody coming from a formal background, was that difficult to make that transition?
No, actually.
Okay.
It was a relief.
Oh.
It was a relief actually not to be able to term things exactly how they should be termed out historically, or that they should fit into a particular theory of photographic history or the history of place.
Yeah.
What happened with our exhibitions was they were becoming their own spaces for history in the making. Because when we put up work, people come into the space and somebody from Moira will come and somebody from Diwar will come and somebody from Honda will come and then react to the pictures and say, oh, that person was the one who fixed the marriage between my uncle and so, So that was the kind of joyful space. And I think to recall something that Sonia just said, in the sense of, for example, we did a large body of documentation on Abdonio last year before last, during our exhibition at Serendipity. And he came in spite of his health. He came with his entire family. They carried him up the staircase because the excise building doesn't have a lift. He wept. He wept in the space, and there were tears of joy that he was there. And that was December, and in January we lost him. So for us, it was such a beautiful way in which that he was remembered because of what we could do. So that's one example of the many different emotional connections that we've been able to make, which are far away from what is written in history books.
Yeah. In fact, I should just mention that they had invited Akshay and Leena and me to do a workshop also, and it was really very overwhelming because we didn't realize how many people are actually really, really interested to dive into their family histories, community histories, and how they can work with it. Because I think that's why this platform also becomes important, because we want to also talk about the methods and tools, etc. And that brings me to my next question, which is the method. And I want to ask all of you, like, have you all over the years of working, I know a lot of it is very ad hoc and a lot of jugaad, as we've been talking about. But is there still some sort of a method that you have developed, perhaps, that you know even roughly that, okay, this is what can work?
So the first thing I realized is persistence. There is a master still alive in Goa, Gaudenz Cardos, and Gaudenz is a master at making flavor, feigy flavors. And I wanted to learn that because flavor is very delicate because you're using uh, naturals and they're falling for naturals. So his garden is his lot of ingredients. Um, for a whole year, he didn't look at me, didn't talk to me. I was a piece of furniture. And this is about 5 years ago. So I was already accomplished at what I knew about fame, but it was humbling. So I had to win his trust. And today, he's like a canary, he can't stop talking. He loves talking. And that's not just one person, it's happened many times. One of the easiest ways for me when I walk into a distillery um, is to walk to the back of the distillery because you've seen what they've thrown and what they've finished. And then you immediately know what flavors he's made or what he's distilling or what he's going to distill. So you always do a cursory walk around and then walk into the distillery and then make careful observations because one slip is enough because they're looking for, they're very, in the beginning, they're very skeptical about what are your intentions. Because this is a different craft for centuries, upper classes or president, and maybe and lower and among their own community, they would be trying to outsmart them. So they're very close knit, very protective, and of course with alcohol, it's my alcohol is better than yours. So everyone's very guarded about all that. So when I come, I just don't wear glasses. As such that I also remove my glasses, and I'm actually looking at it, being very unjudgmental. We're supposed to look at it and then talk. And of course, you have to change your konkani depending on who you're speaking to. You need to know the different terms of what to use, how to use, and then you get accepted. And that's very interesting. And no amount of connections, who you are, all that will never work. Yeah, so that's my methodology. Oh,
Sonia,
Yeah, persistence. Yes.
you want to say something about that?
yeah, so sorry, this is a very interesting picture I took during COVID. This is my one of my another master distiller. He's the last exponent of clay pot clay Launi distillation in the continuous form. His name was Anton Rosar. This is during COVID. COVID happened in Mr. Modi through the lockdown. And then everyone was sitting at home, drinking Morocco, watching TV. But for these guys, their entire livelihood stopped. Now, he's not poor, he has enough money. But this is a picture I just took with my phone, and you can see the sadness in his face. He's got a mask on, but he's covered his absence of feeling, but you can see from his hands, his legs, and everything. He's upset because when the lockdown happened, he couldn't climb his coconut trees. He's 76 years old. He realized he's been doing this all his life, and those 2.5 months thereafter, he couldn't climb the tree again. So he said he suddenly had to stop. Now, why he's upset also is because his sons are not interested in it. Of course, you can't force them, but they don't want to do this trade. His wife had always been against his profession and that he's making a sin product, alcohol, and serving it to everyone else. So she always never looked upon his industry. And so his whole life crumbled around him. He expected to retire, maybe falling off a tree or maybe just falling down and ending his life. But he was forced to stop during COVID. And this for me was a profound moment. And that is the day I started working with coconut fairy. This is about 5 years ago. And I seriously decided to work on coconut fairy and take the industry forward. Today, later you'll be able to try about 5 different expressions or 4 different expressions of coconut fairy simply because of this picture. He still works for me. What I do now, I provide him firewood, I provide him an assistant, I provide him the toddy, I provide him anything that he wants, just to make sure he distills. He distills, he makes ready for us, not big volume, but just to keep it. And he is another great source. My phone, I told my son before walking up, please don't record anything because there's not enough memory. Because I've got gigabytes of recordings of this man talking. He told me, he said, you're the only person who has listened to me ever.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Nobody in the family.
That's incredible. Thank you. What about you? And Sonia.
Yeah, as a method, I will also say persistence. And in this field of Fado and trying to find out what Fado meant in the times gone by in Goa, what was done, not done, what happened, what didn't happen. You have to tap on all these family libraries and family archives, basically,
All the
which
unexpected.
initially nobody wants to let you in. Whether you speak Portuguese or you don't speak Portuguese in the world of Fado. Um, so I guess initially when I was just singing Fado, it was a big question mark. Was the Shisat was singing Fado? So Fado was, a more Portuguese, so therefore more Catholic, Goan Catholic, whatever, our caste circle only. So I heard it from my mother's family. But then I am Shisat, so and they're from Ponda. So it took time, it took years when, people realized that I was serious about this art form and performing it in Portugal, the only Goan artist who ever had a concert in Portugal. I think that slowly, that wall that was there sort of crumbled down. And then when the classes started, is when people realized that I was not in Fado for only the glory, but also to see that Fado lives longer in this land. It may evolve. That will be most welcome. If Fado evolves from its pure form from Portugal to a new form in Goa, why not? Let it evolve, no problem. But for that, we first need a community that is actually aware, educated, and into that world of Fado. So slowly, people started opening up. I hope we can collect more stuff. There is this. This is a book. The lower half actually is what's interesting, but it's too small. It's published in Bastora in the year 1905. This is a book which has notations and lyrics. It's basically for piano and voice. And it's a collection of different things. And I think the fourth or the fifth one is Fado de Sofrimento, a Fado of suffering. The word Fado is there. I really have not checked and validated whether it's really a Fado or not, but at least Fado Sufriment is there. And this is, and the rest of the stuff, there's a lot of Konkani stuff there. Okay, so my argument is I have a few of these booklets which were gifted to me by a Portuguese gentleman whose family lived in Goa for about 300 years and then they left. They were the Conde de Nova Goa, that was the title given to them. And their surname is Castro, is very, very sweet, the gentleman. And he collected these booklets from alfarabistas, which are antique bookshops in Lisbon. And somebody had given these pamphlets, imagine, printed in Bastora. He picked them up in Lisbon and then he showed them to me once when I went there. And he was trying to complete the collection. I think there were 12 booklets, fine booklets, because these are basically for music students to play and, learn and play. And he couldn't complete it. Even I contacted the Dosha and Rangel. He said they didn't have anything left. It was given to Central Library. And he didn't recall that series. So it probably was a very small publication that was done. And it's lost. So years later, this gentleman, Kashur, and I met him again in Lisbon, he gifted me that entire, 4 or 5 booklets. And he said, I don't think anybody else in the world will value this more than you. One is you are from Goa. This is printed in Goa. This talks about Fado and the time of Fado in Goa. So this is a very precious thing. So just to know that in 1905, Fado was already here. We say that Fado was born in 1820s and established mid 1800s. So in less than 80 years or so, it was already here. And one more booklet I have is 1898. So it's already in the 1800s that Fado was being printed here. Of course, I've had debates with musicologists and people who say that no, it might have been just a collection, doesn't necessarily mean that people were singing Fado in Goa. But then why was it being printed with Mando and other stuff that usually only people here would have sung, right? So that's my argument. There's another slide.
Yeah, that other picture.
There's another one.
That's Latin.
Yeah, so this is basically Fado do Sofrimento with the whole score and the lyrics, which is part of that same book.
And the picture.
And there's a photo.
Yeah.
No, the next one, it's a group of people.
Yeah, the
Next one, yes. So this is a photograph I downloaded from Facebook. I don't know if some of you also saw this, but I couldn't get the details of as to when this photograph was clicked. This is a photograph from Goa. It looks to be either an orchestra or a music school because everybody was sitting there holding a music instrument. Okay, there are lots of violins and lots of guitars there, but the row that is sitting down, all of them are holding Portuguese guitars. Now, Portuguese guitar is an instrument that is the backbone of the Fado. It's an instrument that looks like a mandolin. It's slightly wider. It's 12 strings. It's played with false nails, attached nails, and you strum it this way. And so, if you attend a Fado concert, you usually have to have a Portuguese guitar there. You can do it with other stuff also, but traditionally, Portuguese guitar is required. So, 8 Portuguese guitars in this one group in Goa. What were they playing? Some little bit of Fado must have been there. It wouldn't be instrumental all the time. And Portuguese guitar is not an instrument that you would use in Western classical music orchestra where a lot of musicians were, only instruments were playing. Portuguese guitar doesn't figure there. So it might have been a mix of both. That meant a little bit of Fado was already there. Now, this is a photograph I got, but I have no details. I don't know anybody there. I have no idea when this was clicked. But, so what I'm trying to say is archives like these, photographs, lyrics, songs, song books exist. But they exist in private libraries and people are so possessive about it. It is fine because it's a treasure, but do share it with others. A digital copy, a photograph of that. Share a score that you might have in your family with a musician. Because then it will not only be on paper, others can listen to it. Keep the paper with you. Nobody wants to take the treasure from your family. Yesterday, I had a performance at Mother Goa, and I met a lady who told me she had a mando, which is mando is Konkani, right? It's from here. Mando is an art form born here. But all the lyrics are in Portuguese.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she said, I want to gift it to you. Maybe you can sing it. So I told her, don't give me the original. Give me a copy, a digitalized soft copy, whatever. And we'll try to work on it. So there is a lot of stuff. There's this lady who lives part of her life in Portugal and part of her life in Goa. And years ago, she gave me a small booklet of Mando, which was from this composer or publisher who is originally from Shorang. I don't remember the name now. And he had published that book, very few copies, and that was it. Now, few families have that book. Nothing is being done about it. They're keeping it, it's in a cupboard, it's in a locked up place somewhere, and nobody's using it. If young musicians want to revive those pieces, we don't have access to it. Now, so this lady also had gifted me that book. So this took time, as he said, there is persistence. Once people realize that you are there for something more than just fame or glamour or whatever in my field of music, that's when probably they will start opening. I hope more people open up and send soft copies to musicians, not only me, to anybody, and try to get these things out, because otherwise, it's going to be in a cupboard, and 2 generations down the line, the youngsters won't value it because it means nothing to them, it says nothing to them. Likewise, if you do not have a musician in your family, all these scores and everything is not going to make sense. So that's, I think, the method is persistence and convincing people that we're there to take something that is their inheritance and give it somewhere else.
I think we all face it because access is really, really challenging.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes. And I think very few people have the understanding that this, as you say, that somebody else can actually do something with it. I wanted to ask you, in your work, because memory plays such an important role, in everybody's work, but especially you, because you're also recording oral history and also a lot of forgetting. How does that play into the method?
So I first of all have to agree with the persistence part of it and the jugaad part of it. Definitely, and something that just came to mind because of what you've shown us. Advocate Carlos Ferreira, in fact, gave us a beautiful body of material, which is again printed songs, wonders.
Okay.
From again printed in Goa, but printed, Konkani in Portuguese, which was very, very strange, which is something that we showed as well. And again, someone who shared some beautiful songs with us was Clarice Vaz, who is a Saligaonkar. And during the St. Francis Xavier's Festival, when we did a small showcase at the Museum of Christian Art, we had these beautiful, music sheets that were on Goencha Sahib, which we again presented as part of the entire exhibition. So, these beautiful things, they just come from somewhere through some connection, etc. But continuing this whole idea of the method, I think that one size doesn't fit all. With each person or each family or each kind of archive, you really have to figure out the best way to do things. But what we tried to do was to, make audio and video recordings after a series of visits, let's say, and then digitize the material that they were willing to offer us and then offer it back to them so that,
Sure.
we found many, termite ridden albums, uh, papers that have disintegrated, letters among the albums, which makes so much of the story come alive. We had different experiences with all these people. And one of the things we decided along the way, because of the quantity of material, and we were, working through the year in a slow way, but gearing up towards these exhibitions that would happen in December, we decided to also begin to invite people who are also working in this space to facilitate a kind of coming together of these different archives that we can't, access ourselves. So we've worked with people like Vince Costa, Clarice, of course, Nalini,
So sure.
Nalini Souza, Justina. So we've had interactions with the radio and the AIR and the film and the jazz scene, and there's so much learning to be had in everything. And to also say that we have crossed over into the academic space here and there, because people like, let's say, Ananya Jahanara Kabir have done very interesting studies on the whole idea of creolization and what, a space like Goa is, with the diaspora, with people moving up and down, with it being a port. How has music become this wonderful mix, or uh, uh, how have people learned to dress differently or speak differently because of this entire mix that has always existed? I don't know what your question was, but
That's fine. I was just saying, I didn't know that this is great, but I was just saying because you mentioned Ananya Jahanara Kavi, she actually just commented on the Facebook post, I think, and said that I wish I was there. So what to say?
she would have been,
Yeah.
speaking there in the audience. There's one thing I want to add, because it's, of course, not only Goa familiar, but I'm working with oral histories in different spaces. So there is this exhibition, which is a virtual museum of Kodava culture, which is called Sanduka. And Sanduka is something that we developed actually by uh, working on the field, interviewing people, and bringing their stories again forward through this interactive interface, which was the website. Now, the Kodavas are a very, very proud clan, let's say. They feel themselves different to the rest of India altogether, as well as Karnataka. So it was complex. It was really complex to even build a methodology of entering into these spaces. That's not to say that they're not kind or welcoming, but they're very, very suspicious about who will tell their story. So the notions of representation, particularly for us being art historians, becomes a challenging space. we need to do what is right. We need to do what is sensitive. If it even means leaving out parts of the story. There are sacred stories that we have heard and recorded, but we have not put on the website because it crosses those certain boundaries. So, talking about methodologies, I think all these things come into the picture because some stories can't be told also.
Actually, that's a really, I was going to ask that question, but you actually answered it because I have done it also, like held some things back. And how do you come to that decision? And it's a really important thing to think about. But that also brings me to my next thing I wanted to talk about, which is authenticity. And I think that's what people are also trying to, because we are working with other people's archives, say, or histories, oftentimes. Authenticity becomes like a really important thing. And so, therefore, because you also said that the Kodobu people community were very guarded, so there's authenticity and then there's resistance, right? And I think you've all touched upon it. But if there's any particular thing you want to talk about, like like an anecdote, then do share. Because I know that for me, with the Armenian community, like I said, it was over 10 years. But every single time I went to the church or the school, not with the people, but the authorities, I mean, there have been tears, okay, just in the waiting. And it just took so. I think finally, when the book was out, is when they understood. Finally. So, have you all had anything in particular which you want?
I have a question for
Yeah, sure.
actually, if I may. With Goa Familia, a wonderful thing happens is that lots of people send us stuff, but lots of people also ask us, do you have so and so? Do you have this? So, in those terms, someone wrote to us recently and said, do you have archives, that is, photographic archives of distillation processes? And is there someone you can recommend? So, I think that's the question for you.
So very interesting. Now, there are three layers to this question. One is when you look at fame, the average person, and I'm talking from a Goan perspective, not outsider, insider, from a Goan perspective. Because always, when we think of fame, people think about cattle fame, but there's another fame called coconut fame, and there's a lot of cultural amnesia when it comes to coconut fame. People have forgotten it, forgotten about the culture. But forgetting comes with another layer when the community itself is forcing that forgetting. They don't want to be associated with that culture because it was relegated to a particular caste, lower caste. And so interestingly, I get this question very often. Before I started Kazulo, a Feni commentator asked my brother, tell Hansel to meet me because it will be in his interest to meet me. And in that conversation, I was very nervous. Because I read a lot about this person. And in that conversation, that evening, he asked me, "What is your caste?" And I was very surprised, and never expected that question because I wriggled out of it. Okay, but last week I launched a new brand, a new expression of Feni, and I was going around, and again the question was asked, "What is your caste?" But this time, after so many years of that question being frequently asked, I said I'm a mix between a Kunti and a Shudra. And the guy looked at me, and you know what he said? He said, "But you don't talk like one." Yeah. And it's English, isn't it? So it gets more polite. It gets more polite. Yeah. So I get this question very interestingly by a lot of people. Among the lower caste, interesting situation. I was when I was working with the coconut Feni community, the government asked me to write the GI document. A few months to write it. Very proud of the document. And then suddenly community said, "Who is this outsider writing about our spirit?" And I suddenly said, "Hey, I'm not an outsider. I'm Goan, whatever." He said, "No, not from our community." I read word by word, line by line, translated into Konkani, each line, the whole community is sitting at Longini in Mago, and I explained to them everything. There's pin drop silence, like a group like this. I was sitting up and I was explaining, pin drop silence, not one word. And then one community elder stands up and says, "How do you know so much about my culture? How did you get inside knowledge?" Huge. I was suddenly taken aback. Third interesting thing. After I got married, not immediate relatives, but distant relatives would come to me, say, Hansel, you're a geologist and you're making fairy. Our family is not involved in this actually. Only people, alcoholics, will do this, will do that. Went to utter everyone's utter surprise. I actually started focusing on coconut fairy, and I made a product called Dukshiri. Dukshiri everyone loves today, but on the day of the launch, I remember funny Nigel Brito, who's very sharp. He comes and he nudges me and he says, Hansel, congratulations. For the first time in history, Kazulo launches Dukshiri Premium Feni in the market. And I thought, and everyone was around, everyone's drinking and toasting and saying congratulations. And he comes and nudges me, Hansel, congratulations. And I said, thanks. And he says, you know what? I said, what? I said, for launching Dukshiri. He said, no. For the first time, you've got Brahmins to drink Dukshiri. So to answer the question, when it comes to Feni, it's entirely class and caste. Casual Feni is not a problem because upper class people could do it. And because caju's fall on the ground, you can pick up a caju, you can see the process. Coconut Feni, you have to climb up the tree. So entirely skill based and so skill based that it suddenly became lower class because you have to do that labor work. And so there's a full schism. The schism goes so much that the Casual Feni Association is full of upper class people. The Coconut Feni has no representation. The government decides to make Casual Feni the official spirit of Goa, GI Feni. Coconut Feni does not exist. I'm writing all those things for the government. They in fact asked me if they wanted to dismiss Coconut Feni from the GI policy altogether. And that's why they wrote only 2 words of Coconut Feni just to placate me. Anyway, coming to Leena's question. That is why today there's not a single book on Feni. There's no archival images of Feni because it was too low class. Upper class people never took pictures of them. Maybe once in a while, there are a couple of German, European photographers who took pictures. Foreigners took pictures, but Goans never took pictures of the process. As per my knowledge, I cannot make blanket statements. But among the community itself, none of them had cameras.
Sure.
So they never took
They wouldn't have.
So they didn't take pictures at all. And so that's what I mean by cultural amnesia. It's completely a white slate. And for me, as a geologist, you're picking up a rock in 2025 and you're trying to understand emplacement and how it was created millions of years ago. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now with the Feni industry. Picking up, there are pieces. It's not totally blank. You can find out, you can actually see things, and then you're piecing up all that history together and keeping it. I'm not doing it for a particular caste or for an upper class or a lower caste or anybody. I'm just building for posterity. In fact, we commissioned finally one photographer, David D'Souza. The last 5 years, we've been clicking pictures of Feni processes in different parts of Goa to showcase the subtle differences in culture, in community, in processes. And hopefully then finally we'll have pictures maybe 100 years from now.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Makes
that's a
sense.
really important thing to think about because so oftentimes they just didn't have cameras and things we take for granted, you know. Do you think?
If
Yeah.
I may just
Yeah, yeah.
add another, I don't know how we're doing for time, but it's an
Okay.
interesting story.
Oh, good.
So talking about this, I mean, it's one of the biggest things that we've come across, of course, because we know that below a certain strata, cameras were not available. But when we did our exhibition, which was called Families Alak Rivers, we were looking at the Mandovi, we were looking at the Panjim business, street, and we were looking at the people who were there. And very interestingly, the photographer, Asauri Kulkarni, she had this story. She comes from a
I
boat
remember that show
building.
at the ESG.
Yes. So the boat building history that her family has, very fortunately, because her father's brother was working in the customs, and there was a camera that was,
Fantastic.
there, which came to her father. He documented everything,
Yeah.
which was very unusual because you don't have pictures of fishermen,
Sure.
setting off in the sea, and they're very candid pictures, but very beautiful. So that sort of unusual thing adds to our storytelling because it's not really available. Nowadays, of course, everybody has a camera, so
Yeah.
there's a survey. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that
Yeah.
becomes interesting. Class divide is very, very
Absolutely.
clear.
Just today, today because of the camera, the one thing that actually comes out is Instagram research. That everyone taking cameras with photographs of so many things. And and WhatsApp universities, everyone's looking at things through Instagram and then deducing and becoming experts. And that's also very dangerous because we're coming back to where I started, where everything's very superficial and skin deep. Nobody's going deeper. And then also it comes with modern interpretations. So today, recently we had one of a workshop for the industry. A lot of new Fini brands have come up and a lot of new interpretations to what traditional spirits should be. And so as we were, as the students of the industry of the GI, we were trying to explain to them, you can do it, but within the realms of the law. And of course, many people don't agree to that. They say, they look at Fini from the perspective of tequila, or they look at Fini from the perspective of gin. And they say, we can, if people are drinking gin, we can celebrate it, we want people to drink Feni as well. And for that, we have to make Feni like a gin. And so, you start realizing that because of the absence of knowledge, people want to bastardize the entire product. Yes.
Do you think then, or for all of your works, is it challenging evidentiary history? And because you've been working all of you for a while, and has it come to that point when it can sort of do its own thing?
Okay. I'm speaking a lot. So,
Go ahead.
But
No, go ahead.
No, so challenging evidence history. I think you have to keep on challenging because you got to understand what is what. So when I go back to, I walked into a Goa Chitra museum, and Victor Hugo has a distillery on display. A lot of people have seen that, and he called it a traditional Feni distillery, and everyone looked at it, and there was a traditional Feni distillery. But when I walked in before, but one day when I revisited that picture, I looked at it, and my mind exploded. What I saw was not a traditional distillery, I saw a pre-metal age distillery. It's made of entirely of clay, terracotta, wood, and bone. Not a single piece of metal, not a single piece of glass, nothing. And that evidence changes. And it's a real distillery from a family who had stopped distilling it. Grandfather locked that distillery, kept it, and never touched it. And so the grandson suddenly opened it, and Victor Hugo acquired it. And now it's on display. But it certainly challenges everything we know about this industry. How old it is, what it stood for, how it was made, craft credentials certainly shoot up. And for the best part for Goa, and I think for the world, is I think this is probably the only distillery in existence of its kind of that caliber. Because otherwise it's only left to drawings. So it also rewrites history from the fact that maybe did the Arabs invent distillation or we were doing it. If we had to do it in modern time using post metal age, where we using metal, like Arabian alphabets are all made of copper. So came post metal age. This is pre-metal age, entirely out of clay. And you talk to those distillers, and the last distiller, Anton Ruzar, who was sitting there, he suddenly tells you that they're very, very close to clay, very close to mud, and he tell you, no, this is the way and this is the best. You still talk to people in Goa, they'll say, Launi's of Feni is the best. Launi Feni. And that harks back from that vestige of old memory where clay was the original. But in broken, you don't change it. Yeah.
You want to say? Yeah, an example I would say about this is also going back to the Portuguese guitar. So this instrument, as of now in India, we have only 3 musicians that can play that instrument. 2 live in Goa and one has literally given up. He's from Mizoram originally, he was in Bangalore. So, and since for Fado, a Portuguese guitar is a must, it becomes a very, very important element. And in that photograph, as you've seen, so many people holding the Portuguese guitar. There are Portuguese guitars in the possession of families in Goa. Nobody plays them. Nobody they're not even maintained properly. They're just a showpiece or, on a wall or in a cupboard, in a showcase. For us to know that Portuguese guitars were constructed in Goa in the past. I think the last Portuguese guitar maker passed away maybe 20 or 25 years ago when I was brand new to the Fado. But those who knew of it, those who possessed that Portuguese guitar, that art could have been, the technique could have been passed on. Now the problem is, I'm talking to different people. Like, we have 300 plus odd students who have learned to sing Fado and know what is Fado. Now, okay, now who's going to accompany them? So we sometime in the future need more Portuguese guitars in Goa and more people. We have ample number of musicians, super talented musicians. It's very easy for them to learn the style of playing the fado because they play so many styles. So it's not impossible. As far as the musicianship is concerned, we have it. We don't have is the instrument. Now, we can even get instruments from Portugal. A good Portuguese guitar is about €1,000, a good standard one. And then, of course, it goes higher. Anything below that is more of a showpiece. It's not really good for a concert. But the problem is the wood that they use, because it's handmade in Portugal, does not bear our humidity and our weather. The guitars start getting bumps. The guitars start, going bonky. And for repairs, it has to go back to Portugal, which is very expensive, not practical, difficult, all that. Now, if that guitar construction thing had been archived or whatever, somehow documented, whatever, we could have restarted that in Goa. So there are these places where you don't know what to do. Your hands are sort of tied. And now this is fine. It's an example of the instrument. So my question, this is the effort I'm doing, I'm working on is the same thing shouldn't happen with the music. So if there is anything written, I urge openly and shamelessly, if anybody has music, books, documents, anything in your family that pertains to music in Goa of the years gone by. Nobody sings that anymore, doesn't matter. Publish it, share it. Originals keep with you, they're treasures, but the rest of it, share it. And that's how it will live. That's
the parallel history that you're all creating. I want to ask oh, sorry, you wanted to say something from this, or you?
No, I just want to add one small thing which actually connects back to what you said about the records of why the cashew was brought here and, for soil erosion. So that's a statement that I came across also. And I also am running an exhibition called Traveling Plants, which looks at this entire, discussion of why did plants travel in the first place, colonialism being a large part of it. So in terms of this was a revelation for me because the kind of evidence that we look at in terms of historical records that get cut, pasted, and then come onto the internet and spread so widely, I think that is another challenge that we have to deal with, that we need to understand whether our evidence is true or false.
Yeah.
And I think this is a big thing, particularly in a place like Goa, but all over, I think, that this kind of falsity of information that can only, we can only say whether it's true or false.
What's convenient? Like whatever.
Sometimes it's convenient because that's the way our atmosphere is, climate is right now. So I think that is something that is important to think of in terms of what do we do when we also write texts and put it out there, and someone else may take it and use it in a different context. So that is something I thought I would mention.
Absolutely. I'll ask one last question and then maybe we can open it up for some questions. I wanted to ask all of you, what is at stake if you don't do this work?
What is at stake? So I think this is when I go back to paintings, it's not just 450 years of history when the Portuguese start writing about painting. It goes back even further, simply by looking at that one distillery. It's craftsmanship. I have a picture. I think there's one more picture that I have. I'll show you. His name is Antonio. He doesn't know how old he is. He's one of us. He was forced to retire this year because sadly he's gone a little senile and he threw out all the carrot juice instead of keeping it. And so the whole team said, it's a sad story, but he just walked off and did not come back. But I'll show you the picture of Antonio. Look at his face. For me, what's at stake is craftsmanship. We said we tend to invisibilize lower classes and art forms of lower classes. If it's Kathakali...
Like other ones.
No, next one. Get that one. Okay. If it's Kathakali, if it's Bharatanatyam, if it's Fado as well, you tend to celebrate them because they're art forms of the upper class and appreciated by the upper class. And for me, when I look at this, and yes, sir, I totally agree with that. I also see art form in craftsmanship like this, in the liquid that comes out. And maybe someone making a Kolhapuri chapel, and the art form maybe he's trying to showcase, or maybe a Lucknowi Muslim guy trying to make bone art. Very different. But they're working with their hands, they're working with simple tools, working with simple ingredients, and creating art. And for me, that is it. We lose not just a lifestyle and maybe a consumable product, but we also lose a huge bit of culture. That is a guy who's Antonio. He's just sealing a pot with clay. Very simple, but look at the attention to detail, his focus. Focus, that's what it is. Resolute to craft. He comes at 4, he used to come at 4:30 in the morning on a cycle and prepare his stuff. 6 o'clock on the dot, start the fire. I mean, seal everything and it's on the dot, light the fire. And that regimental system went on for generations. Today is not, we are trying to make it also aspirational that the new generation comes back to this trade because we're also losing, as Sonia said earlier, just like Fado, Fadi is not taught in schools, not taught we don't get a degree of Fadi. We learn it through the family. And so we are losing all that. I had one distiller, one young boy, he still works with me. I took him as a distiller. His girlfriend left him because he worked as a distiller. I don't want to have a boyfriend who's a failed distiller.
Wow.
I've had this question from a lot of people who told me, when I said forgetting, they don't want to do this industry anymore because their grandsons will not get married or people will be worried about that. So things like that. This boy now came back and he's working as a bartender. He just mixes simple drinks at the distillery. But he said they cannot make, he doesn't want to make penny because, and I also felt that. I mean, after maybe how many years of generations of being in the same trade, he wants to move out. But at least he's close to his industry. That's why he's taken a 50% pay cut from distiller to bartender.
Wow.
But he's taken that because he still doesn't, money is not the problem. He wants to break the shackles of culture. But for us, this has to be kept alive. It's a craft which we are going to keep alive through a lot of work.
In Fado, the thing that if this is not done, it's like going to the beach, getting some sand in your hand and then holding very tight onto it. And then there's nothing left. And that is what has happened with Fado and Goa. The families that spoke Portuguese had pianos in their houses, could afford Portuguese guitars and appreciated the Fado, held it very close. And today it's gone. So that's the whole idea. We need to get it out to anybody and everybody that follows the Fado. The project that I mentioned, Fado in the City, were those 10 concerts. We had even kept a prize for the person who attended maximum of those 10 concerts. And the prize went to a lady who recently passed away this month in June, who was a big fan of Fado. And she was a Sardarni.
Wow.
Okay, she was a Sardarni who made Goa a home, bubbly and wonderful person. And we're going to miss her in Fado. And she even came for the classes. She was one of our students in the MAPSA batch, and in her 80s already. But that is the thing, because you can find people who appreciate the Fado when they don't even speak the language, or they have nothing to do with Portugal, and nothing to do with the Portuguese regime in Goa. It's nothing to do with the regime or being patriotic or non-patriotic. It is a beautiful art form, and the fact that it has lived here for so long, it needs to live further. So a lot of collections exist in Goa, and as I said, in those particular homes, they have been held so close that one day some generation will open and those Fado books will be eaten by termites. And that's what we will find, unfortunately. So that's what we stand to lose.
Yeah. And you?
Yeah, I of course completely agree. And working with memory and working with people's stories, I think is so rich. We are losing our crafts by the day, by the minute. We're losing language, we're losing recipes, where everything is interconnected. Actually, they cannot be isolated from one another. The music, the dance, the food, the drink, the living, it's all together. So I think what we do is really important. And it's wonderful to be able to have a platform like this to share it. I know there's lots of people out there who are interested, they want to share their stories, but we need to do it now because the generations are passing away. We're losing those memories, we're losing those stories, we're losing those records that are no more on papers, or so we have to carry it forward somehow. And I think that people are interested now. I think the younger generation looks to be interested in all these things, like Devesh, who is trying to revive folk instruments, for instance. Uh, People who are starting archives, talking to their own families, and uh, building up these stories and putting it out there. So I think we do have hope, but there's still lots to do.
Yes, and I think everybody can actually do it in their own ways. That's the beauty of
Yes.
this. There is no rule, and it's your story, and you should say it.